So today we're going to be talking about transphobia. So click away if you do not want to be triggered by that or other really depressing topics. Today we're going to be talking about what is apparently number 5 in America right now, which is Dave Chappelle's latest stand-up, Closer, where he makes an impassioned plea, and in his special, he claims that he's here tonight to close with an objective. And it's not entirely clear what his objective is at first, but he makes it pretty apparent early on that his objective is to talk about gay people the way that people don't talk about gay people. And I'd love to say he's just talking about gay people, but a majority of this special is fixated on trans people. So I figured I would do a video reacting to it as a trans woman. The trans community as a whole is very vulnerable, and in my opinion, it is the most vulnerable part of the LGBT community, not only right now, but it always has been. There's transphobia all over the world, but there's transphobia within the gay community. There's transphobia within day-to-day interactions between people who love the transgender people in their lives. That's the reason why we have so many transgender youth kill themselves. I feel like I have to speak about this because I never see trans people talking about trans people. It's always cis people talking about trans people. It is a serious problem where not only do people take us less seriously, but a lot of people don't realize how transphobic the average person is because it's not directed at them, and it isn't politically correct to be transphobic, so they save it for private transphobia, if that makes sense. You don't see as many people on the street being open about their hatred. I like to think because there's been a movement of more acceptance, but in reality, they still do it. It's just online instead, or in some other way, they direct their abuse instead. This entire special is infuriating to watch as a trans person because he paints the queer community like this moral arbiter that has all this power and influence over places that isn't just like South and West Hollywood. Like, he really is out here acting like when he got canceled on Twitter, it was like a big deal in the world. No, Dave, nobody cares what the trans community has to think. That's why they're so rabid online. I mean, Dave makes maybe 1 or 2 points in this special that I agree with. He's not wrong when he says that the online discourse around trans rights is pretty toxic, and that's on both ends. But it's no excuse to make this joke of a special that he did. I don't know what compels a person to write an entire set list where the punchline is girls with dicks. He uses this word, so I'm going to use it. He constantly gets told that he's punching down, and the thesis of this is that people show more outrage and support for the gay community than they do for the Black community. And while he has very important points on racial injustice and the entire problem with Black Lives Matter, there's a whole different argument being made here, because the fact that trans people are fighting for recognition and rights on the internet is not related to the systemic racism that has always been inherently a problem in America. And he always says, I don't have a problem with trans people. I have a problem with white people. But you spend the whole special tearing in to white trans people. And he says, oh, but I know that those Black gay people, they would never do that to me. I got their back. No, you don't. Black trans people are so disproportionately murdered compared to any other demographic that the people he's hurting the most are the queer Black people. Queer people of color in general are murdered at a disproportionate rate to the rest of the queer community. That is why it is not my place to say my people are being murdered, because the truth is that racism and homophobia and transphobia, they're all intertwined in this lovely web of lies called discrimination. I do not understand the point of this special because he so clearly has so many opinions about injustice and inequality, but then he turns it around and makes it as if, well, hold on, trans people, don't get too excited. Throughout this special, I want you to take a shot every time he pauses for laughs after saying something explicit about a trans person. Like when he pauses for laughs after saying a girl with a dick, or when he talks about tenderizing a trans person's titties. Like, the amount of times he pauses for laughs only for the public to cheer at a story of him recounting beating up a trans person is a little overwhelming. An entire crowd of people cheering at the thought of a trans man being punched in the tit does not have no impact. You can say it's just a joke, but nothing exists in a vacuum, and we live in a world where trans people are murdered. All this anger he has directed towards people like Caitlyn Jenner. I agree that Caitlyn Jenner being Woman of the Year was a crock of shit. I don't know a single trans person who wanted that. He forgets that the people he's complaining about are the people with money, the people who control media, or the people who have a say in what happens in the media. And punching down is quite literally what he's doing, because none of us trans people have anything to do with it, but we will face the consequences. I'm not just going to completely dump on this special because, believe it or not, I think he made a few good points. So before I get into reacting to this, I would like to say the things about the special that I liked. I like how he was open about his vaccination status, and he talked a lot about being diagnosed with COVID, what COVID means, and the consequences of COVID, because I'm just going to take a shot in the dark and say a lot of his fan base, I guarantee you, is not vaccinated. And I think that this kind of public figure has the power to influence people. And so I'm really happy he used some of his airtime to talk about that. He talked about violence against Asian people, especially at the height of the pandemic, and specifically violence by Black people against Asian people. And I thought that was a really important message to bring, especially because I feel like nobody is talking about it anymore, and it was nice to see it acknowledged. I liked the constant references to space Jews, because, not gonna lie, the funniest thing in the world to me is the idea that there are people that think that forest fires are caused by space Jewish lasers. And that's the thing. He's taking the piss out of it, which actually, in my opinion, gets the message across, because he doesn't even say anything particular about the people who believe in that, about like flat earthers. He doesn't say anything about that. All he does is set up a joke at nobody's expense. And I wish that he could do that with trans people. He talked about the children's book that's being released that's supposed to help teach your kids about racism. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's great to have a book illustrate that to a kid, because as someone who has babysat, it isn't that easy explaining to a kid why hate crimes are committed or why racism is such a problem. And I think these are all really important messages that he brought to light. However, he did not spend the majority of his special talking about these things. The majority of his special was focused on the LGBT, or as he likes to say, LBGT community. Or at one point, the LBGTZQ what. And I'm sorry, I think it's done intentionally to make us seem less serious. Let's see what all the fuss is about.
Go. And I hate to say this, but there was a lot of videos, sadly, of Black people beating up Asians for no reason. Oh, these attacks were unprovoked. I couldn't believe it. And I was sitting in the room watching this shit. It was stressing me out. I was stressed already, because the whole time when you get coronavirus, at least the first 5 days, so they come back to Earth, decide that they want to claim the Earth for their very own. It's a pretty good plot line, huh? I call it Space Jews.
Yeah, that's what some people think.
Space Jews. This is my last special because I have an objective tonight. I came here tonight because this body of work that I've done on Netflix, I'm going to complete. All the questions you might have had about all these jokes I've said in the last few years, I hope to answer tonight. I'd like to start by addressing the LBGTQ community.
How hard is it? LGBTQ. It's not that hard. He doesn't come in peace.
Sad story. The baby was the #1 streaming artist until about a couple weeks ago. Took a nasty spill on stage and said some wild stuff about the LBGTQ community during a concert in Florida. Now, you know I go hard in the paint, but even I saw that shit, was like, God damn, the baby.
He's right. It was horrible. I'm not going to say what he said.
Pushed the button, didn't
He did.
He pushed the button, punched the LGBTQ community right.
Notice how he always gets it right. His right, the same way.
Can't do that.
I think that what Dave is doing is making light of the things that DaBaby said. In quote, he punched them right in their aids. That is what he said. And that, I think, misses the point entirely of what was so strange and hurtful about what DaBaby said, because he did double down on it, by the way. He said that queer people were all basically junked out AIDS-infected monsters. And the truth is that a lot of people see them that way. And our community is not so far removed from the HIV crisis. So, like, I don't understand how any gay person could see somebody say something like that and not immediately have a red flag go off, reducing us down to the lowest common denominator. And for the amount of people that were killed by HIV and the inaction of the government as the pandemic happened, it's appalling. And for not only for DaBaby to double down on it, but then for Dave to not even see one lick of a problem in the way he's representing this issue. I just think it's very sad. One of the reasons why trans and queer people are murdered after the fact that somebody discovers they're trans or queer is because they are afraid that they are now tainted. They are afraid that either this person tricked them, trapped them, turned them gay, or in this case, a lot of people believe that all gay people have AIDS. Some people even believe that it was sent by God as a punishment. But if God is really sending down plagues to punish people, then why are conservatives dying from COVID at such a disproportionate rate?
Acknowledge that. But, a lot of the LGBTQ community doesn't know the baby's history. He's a wild guy. He once shot a nigga and killed him in Walmart. Oh, this is true. Google it. The baby shot and killed a nigga in Walmart, North Carolina. Nothing bad happened to his career.
Is that true?
Do you see where I'm going with this?
And that's the fault of trans people.
Shoot and kill a nigga. But you better not hurt a gay person's feelings. And this is precisely the disparity.
What I don't get about this is that nobody's saying that it was okay that he shot and killed that person. No gay rights person or no pro-LGBT people are like, yeah, you know what? This is worse, Dave. No, they're not the same thing. They didn't happen at the same time. Why can't we as humans be better as we get older and progress? But that's not what anybody wants. This is a false comparison. Don't get me wrong. It's ridiculous that he didn't get punished for killing a person. But I think that says more about what happens to rich people than it does about what has to do with trans people or queer people in general. I mean, the LBGT community is not that powerful, Dave.
I have a question for the audience. And this is a real question. I'm not joking around. Is it possible that a gay person can be racist?
Yes.
Do you really think so?
Obviously.
Look at Mike Pence. I'm guessing, but I bet you he's gay. And he's not Pride Parade gay either. He's sad gay. I feel bad for him.
That's the worst thing he can say about Mike Pence, that he's gay.
You think I hate gay people, and what you're really seeing is that I am jealous of gay people. Oh, I'm jealous. I'm not the only black person that feels this way. We blacks, we look at the gay community and we go, God damn it, look how well that movement is going.
One line is not indicative of how well these movements are going in general. Sure, trans Twitter is doing pretty well actively. That doesn't mean that trans rights are no longer a thing that need to be fought for. That doesn't mean that people don't still deal with transphobia daily. But that's the thing. We're making a bunch of comparisons so that it's like, see, Trans people, in fact, are the problem. He's just making it out to be as simple as, well, one group or the other group. Why can't everybody have rights? Why can't everybody not have to deal with discrimination? No trans person, no gay person, I think, can sit right with themselves, not advocating as hard for Black Lives Matter and other injustices in the world. That's the thing. I don't think that's a position that anyone takes. I don't know any gay people that are like, I say trans rights, but I don't care about the rights of other minorities. That's not how my community is. I don't know about you.
I can't help but feel like if slaves had baby oil and booty shorts, we might have been free 100 years sooner. You know what I mean?
I get that these are jokes, but I just don't get it. I don't get what's funny about it. Does he really think that gay slaves were treated better by the Puritans? These aren't related. Trans people have nothing to do with the enslavement of people. Yes, white people do. And it is not my place to tell him how to feel about these issues, because the truth is that he's right about a lot of this stuff, but he brings the queer community into it at every chance he gets. And I think it's for attention. I think it's because he knows the people that watch him feel that way too. And that's the thing. You can say, oh, they're just jokes, but my life's not a joke, and he's making my life a joke, and the people who live my life are going to be less safe because of these kinds of feelings. Transphobia is everywhere. Queer homophobia, it's everywhere. It isn't as loud as it used to be, but it is louder than it has been in a while online. And I think it's because more and more people are realizing that it's okay to be hate. Hate groups have always existed. But if you're really trying to combat hate, Dave, is this the best you can do? Blame the trans? Because he does refer to us as that, as a trans. And the LBGT community, he doesn't care about who he's speaking about. He isn't speaking to us. He's not making this for the gay community. He's making this to spite the gay community.
I don't hate gay people at all. I respect the shit out of you. Well, not all of it.
I would like to point out that most of this special, he speaks to the gay community, but he spends the majority of his time disparaging and belittling trans bodies and trans people. He spends most of his time talking about how, ooh, I don't know about trans women. I don't know about their vagina. I don't know about this. Making fun of us, making fun of how we speak, or Adam's apples. He says a lot more things about the trans community than he does about the gay community. And you want to know why that is? Because I believe him when he says he doesn't have a problem with gay people. I think that he only has a problem with trans people, honestly. And I think he has a problem with the way that trans people have responded to him online, and he's entitled to feel that way. But he doesn't realize the power he wields and the amount of people who probably feel the same way as him that are going to think, you know what? You're right, Dave. I think that trans pussy is like impossible pussy too. I think that if I found someone I was sleeping with was trans, I'll murder them. I'm not saying that's going to directly happen, but this is not going to make less trans people get murdered. And the people that are getting murdered are queer people of color. And I don't think he cares about the consequences of that, because in his mind, he's helping the Black community get murdered less. We're not talking enough about the effects that transphobia has on the average trans person. I don't care that he thinks that people like Caitlyn Jenner are gassed up too much, because I frankly agree. I don't think she deserved to be Woman of the Year the first year she transitioned. I don't know what she did to accomplish that, but I don't see how that's the fault of trans people at all. I'm not going to unpack any more about AIDS and HIV and the stigma that gay people live with, because I don't want this video to go on forever. But I just call this shit out, because I think way too many people are willing to give him a pass because he's right about some things. But I am sick of how every time there's a conversation about trans people, it is not had by trans people or with trans people, but it is of cis people talking about us like we are objects or things. Like him coming out pro-TERF, I don't think he's dumb enough to think that wasn't going to be controversial. I think that he knew that enough people were going to agree with him that he wouldn't be hurt by it. And I'm scared by that. You think I hate gay people, but I am jealous. I don't think you hate gay people, Dave. I think you hate trans people. And you know what? Nothing in this special told me anything besides that, other than a very heartfelt story about, I have a trans friend, so I can't be transphobic. Whatever. Even that heartfelt story about his one trans friend ends with her killing herself. And I'm sorry, Dave, but I don't think you can blame her death on just circumstance and not even consider the possibility that these sorts of things happen because of transphobia in society, because of the way trans people are debased on a regular basis. And I don't think you're special is making it any better for people like her.
I'm not that fond of these newer gays. Too sensitive. Too brittle. Those aren't the gays I grew up with. I miss them old school gays.
You miss the old school gays because they were all either living sad, closeted lives, being persecuted and unable to practice or be gay because it was illegal to cross-dress, and we're just supposed to act like now we're just entitled, when in reality there's a whole new generation of gay people who can be authentic and express themselves. No, it's just boiled down to a joke. You're going to find that throughout this special, trans people are the punchline. Oh, sorry. Sometimes gay people too. See, he misses the old gays. Gay people are too sensitive.
Them Stonewall niggas, them the ones that I respect.
So he does respect people who stand up for gay rights. He just does not respect it when it's directed at him.
I'm gay, and I want to be like a Stonewall nigga.
I mean,
Old
we all do.
gangsta gays, them glory hole niggas, them the ones I like. You wanna know why they put that hole in the wall? I'll tell you.
I can't believe I'm sitting through this.
A lot of courage on both sides of that hole, nigga.
There is a lot of courage on both sides of that hole, and there's a lot of courage throughout the gay and trans and queer community, and whatever he says here is not going to change the fact that we are a very powerful community. Yeah, we may not hold influence throughout the whole world. Yeah, maybe we only have a loud portion of some of social media, but the reason he makes this special is because he sees how special the gay community is, and he said it himself. He's jealous.
The fight, I almost got in a fight. It's complicated. I was in a bar in Austin with my wife, and at the table that she came from, and I peeped game. The men at the table were filming me. This happens when you're famous. People will come over and try to rattle your cage and get you to say something stupid or dumb so that their buddies can film it and they get a video of you embarrassing yourself. And clearly, this is what's happening. And these dumb motherfuckers thought that it was my first rodeo. Badly it worked. I ran right over there. I said, I pointed right in the camera. I said, "You's a bitch ass nigga for doing this to me." The dude was shocked that I said it. He said, "Oh." And when he did like this, I seen all his fingernails was painted, and I realized, like, uh-oh. This fella's gay. Now, you know how I talk. I call everybody a bitch ass nigga, you know what I mean? But that's not a right thing to do if they're gay, you know what I mean? And now I was in trouble. And not only that, the motherfucker was huge. He stood up, he was towering over.
Dave acting like people don't regularly and willingly call gay people all sorts of names all the time. It's just wild to me. Like, am I the only one that lives in a world that is still transphobic? Or is he speaking from his place of privilege? Because I don't see this, Dave. You can't call gay people names? Since when? Was that a rule? Because if it is, I'm going to hell because I was a bitch in high school.
Started barking on me, but I stood my ground. I wasn't scared. How could I be scared? This motherfucker's shirt was tied up in a knot like this. How fuck this guy? Let's go.
Isn't it funny that he's gay? Gay people are hilarious. Oh my god.
Guess what he did? He picked up his phone and he called the police. And this thing I'm describing is a major issue that I have with that community. Gay people are minorities until they need to be white again. I'm being very brutally honest so we can solve this problem. I'm telling you right now, a black gay person would have never done that to me. Because a black gay person knows when the police shows up, they're not going to care who called them.
So let's break this down. Do I believe this story happened? Maybe. I'm gonna just act as if it did happen. I fully believe that there may have been a gay guy in Texas who was tone deaf enough to use his white privilege as a weapon against him and call the cops. And that is horrible. That is not something that any community should be okay with. And the issues of racism that go as deep as this do deserve to be talked about, and I'm glad he's talking about them. But then he says, and that is my problem with this community. Is racism exclusive to gay people, Dave? Like, and at another point, when he says that if the slaves had been gay, maybe they'd be freed faster, does he really believe that? Or is he just getting attention because he knows that people like it when people tear into gay people? Because I do not understand how he can truly believe that the issues of racism, let's say in a place like Texas, are unique to the gay community. So how are these related? How is this one idiot who wields his white privilege poorly, why does that mean that transgender people are getting on their high horse, Dave? Because that is what you say in this special, and you say a lot of other things about trans people, but you specifically say that gay people need to calm down. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't see how the actions of this gay person relate to the community as a whole. Just like how whenever some racist online is just like, oh yeah, well, black people commit more crime. And it's like, there's so much to unpack there that I don't even know where to start. So I'm not going to, but I hate this. I think the worst part about this clip for me is the fact that he says a black gay person wouldn't do this to me. He, without a lick of irony, says that a black gay person would never do that to him without any awareness of knowing the people that are hurt most by this behavior and the most in danger as a result of this are queer people of color. I'm going to be honest, and I think that a lot of his demographics skew in the Deep South. I think a lot of his demographics do skew towards more people who are more likely to be homophobic and more likely to be transphobic. And I just think it is gross that now he's flipped the narrative to, do you guys think that gay people are racist because they want rights? Because that's what he did. And that's what he says this whole time. He even goes so far as to blame the suicide of his one trans friend on the trans community. Because God forbid a life of transphobia be the actual problem. I get what he's saying here, and I get that he's trying to make a plea to white people to say, look at all these things you care about. Care about black lives as much as you care about those things. And I think that's really important. But he is punching down. He is punching down at the gay community. He's punching down at the LGBT community. The LBGT. He's forgetting that all he's doing is emboldening the people who already have these beliefs, the people who do commit hate crimes, the people who do hate trans people and resent their existence. He's emboldening them to be louder and more abusive to those people. And I do not think that this is going to make more people happy and less people get killed. I think that more trans people are going to experience abuse. And I'm not saying just directly because of him, but somebody with his influence has the power to change people's mind. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me that I personally am the reason why they don't see the trans community the way they used to. And do you know how much pressure that is on a trans person to have the pressure of the entire validity and acceptance of your community by the people in your life be on your shoulders? I am asked questions. People are always asking me really personal questions, things they're confused about, of what they do with pronouns. And look, I'm happy to do it. I consider myself a reasonable person, and I get that not everybody understands trans issues, and I want the world to be a better place to be trans. But it is so much pressure to put on trans people to not only have to represent their whole community, but then now we're to blame for all these things. And you know what? What do we do about it? Because the truth is that I guarantee you, all this special is doing is getting him more love. And good for him, I guess. But it's not good for us. He acts like nobody's allowed to be homophobic anymore, or else the mean Twitter gays are going to cancel you. But I don't know. I don't think that's real, Dave. I don't think, first of all, that the gay community has any real influence other than on some brands and advertisements in, PC culture and in, you know what? We are not very powerful. We do not have that much of a voice, and we are only starting to get our voice because of those gay people at Stonewall that you respect so much. So maybe don't co-opt the movement for trans acceptance as a means to say, this is why white people are racist. Because the reasons why white people are racist are so deep and so fucked up, and it's not my place to talk about this. Does he care that trans Twitter has nothing to do or no influence over the places all over the world where it's illegal to be trans, illegal to cross-dress, people get shot in the street because they're gay. No, he doesn't care about that. He thinks that being canceled on trans Twitter is as bad as killing someone. He says that in his special. I would like everybody to watch this special if you don't believe me. All it's done is given an army of transphobes to rush to his defense, and let them at me. Link below some people that I think make great videos on this topic, but the truth is that I think we're being drowned out in our voices because I think the average trans person suffers depression, can't deal with public scrutiny, and I mean, I just deal with the existential dread that everything's getting worse every day and there's nothing you can do to make anything better. But I'm trying to make the world a better place. So what do I do?
About 6 years ago, there was a lesbian woman that tried to sell a story about me to TMZ. Thank goodness TMZ could see right through the sham of that story. This woman claimed that I beat her up in a nightclub because she was a lesbian. That is fucking crazy. Bitch, I didn't even know you was a woman.
Notice how he says this. This woman claims that I beat her up in a nightclub because she was a lesbian. He admits that he did beat her up in the nightclub. But you know what he does? He says it's okay because he didn't know. He didn't know that she was a woman. So I guess it's okay to beat up trans men? I know that he doesn't believe he's saying this, but a lot of people treat trans people as less than. And I believe him saying it's okay because I didn't know if she was a guy or a girl. I believe that that is a form of dehumanization. Listen to that laugh.
Thank God TMZ didn't believe that. Because I did beat the shit out of her, I'm not gonna lie.
See? And they cheer. The public is cheering for him because of the way he framed this story.
I came in the club.
This mean person, who was gay, came up to me and she falsely accused me of a story where I beat her up. And I did not beat her up because she was lesbian. I did beat her up, but she deserved it. Woo! A whole crowd of people cheering him for beating up a woman.
Miss, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Benign talk. Nothing to it. And all of a sudden, this lesbian fellow stepped between us.
This lesbian fellow.
I said, yo, my man, back up like that.
And listen to the voice he does. He does a voice every time he imitates a trans person. It's very weird. He has a whole act. I mean, about trans people. I wonder what he's been thinking about.
She said, I ain't backing up all shit, nigga. That's my girl. I said, bro, you gonna have to give me 3 feet like this. She said, stop calling me a man, motherfucker. I'm a woman. I said, what?
Laugh. Her gender is hard to pinpoint. Oh, how funny it is, the queer and trans experience. How dare she not conform to my needs? I'm gonna beat her up.
I said, oh my God, you are a woman. It was just too much for me to even wrap my mind around. But I tell you what, I unballed my fist immediately and I softened my posture so that she would know she's in no danger. I even changed the tone of my voice. I said softly, sweetly, like a pimp might say. Bitch, I'm about to slap the shit out of you.
Look at that. Bitch, I'm about to slap the shit out of you. Crowd goes wild. At this point, he has said nothing about this poor woman other than that she looks like a man, is a lesbian, and doesn't want him flirting with her girlfriend. But the crowd is genuinely cheering at the concept of him beating the shit out of her.
I didn't say that. She dropped that foot back. Boom. She was in a perfect southpaw stance. Her shoulders were angled correctly. Her head movement was good. I said, oh no! This bitch boxes for real. I had no choice. I had to go to work. I let that jab go. You should see me go, nigga. I tenderized them titties like chicken cutlets. Uproarious
Uproarious cheering for tenderizing those titties. I don't even know. I mean, am I the only person that sees this like this? Or am I just not in on the joke? Because, again, most straight and cis people think, oh, that's a hilarious joke. But in a vacuum, maybe. But when transphobia is your life and being trans is your life, it's really not funny when people are like, ha ha, could you imagine how those androgynous titties slapped? Like, I think it's common in the queer experience to have been beaten up at least once. It is very traumatic. And we have a room of people cheering for a gay woman being beaten up.
I want the toxic masculinity out of that bitch.
I'm sure you did. If I'm spending my time watching this.
And I'd only hire girls with long titties and long vagina hair that looks like they slept on it. And I would keep a pile of dirt right next to the stage. I come back, bitch, get your feet in that dirt and get up there and give those people what they came to see.
I know it's a joke. But what is hey, never mind. This man is really like, bad things about women? That's not me. Never. I'm gonna beat you up, you stupid bitch.
An old white lady, this is true. She was following me around the mall, which sounds paranoid, but I'm sure she was following me. Mean lady too. You ever see a woman with lines on her face that just tell you, like, even if she smiled, it looked like it would hurt. Oh, in the back, and as soon as I open my car door, I hear a voice go, Dave Chappelle, just like that. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was her. I looked back, and sure enough, there she was, that face. To be honest with you, she probably wasn't even that old. She's probably around my age. But she was a white woman. This bitch looked terrible.
This bitch looked terrible. So many women get reduced to nothing but their appearance every day. Real classy, Dave.
And she didn't say anything back. All she said was, I watch your comedy. I said, uh-oh. And then she says, it's true. She goes, sounds to me like you hate women. I said, well, you know what, miss? It's art. You're free to interpret this art however you like, but I can tell you, as the maker of this art, that I don't believe that I feel that way. And she said,
I can tell you as the maker of this art that I don't believe that I feel that way. That's a lot of words to say, I don't hate women. Is it just me?
well, I think. And I said, shut up, bitch. Shut the fuck up. Before I kill you.
Listen to that crowd cheer. Shut up, bitch. Shut the fuck up. This is like the 5th time the crowd has erupted cheering at the thought of telling an old, ugly bitch, his words, to shut the fuck up. I'll kill you. And they're cheering.
Just kidding, I didn't say that.
I don't believe any of these stories. I don't believe he said any of this.
I was more clever than that.
I feel like he's inventing stories of public altercations with gay people for the narrative of his joke, so he can set up a punchline that is, that person's gay.
Did you see me? Did you buy a ticket to a concert I did? I doubt that. Or maybe you watch one of my specials on Netflix. Or did I follow you to your car and do my act? She said, what? I said, keep it in the comment section. This is real life. Ta-ta.
Okay, this is something that he has said a lot in the past of, oh, well, are you criticizing me because you're a fan, or are you criticizing me just because you heard about me? Which is not attacking the issue at its root, it's attacking the person who brings the issue to light. He does not believe he can be criticized by someone who doesn't consider themselves a fan. And let me tell you, Dave, I used to be a fan. When I was a child, I used to bond with my family watching this crap. And don't get me wrong, I believe him when he says he might be the GOAT, because he is a charismatic, funny guy who knows how to write a punchline. I just wish that it wasn't always punching down.
Some people here, but not everybody. People say things to me all the time, but what you don't know is it does affect me. I think about it.
Do the things people say about you affect you? Do they make you sad? Does it make you reconsider your entire life? I wouldn't know anything about that, Dave. Huh. Awkward.
What could I possibly be saying that would make these bitches think I hate women?
At least he's self-aware there.
Couldn't figure it out. I Googled the dictionary definition of a feminist just to make sure I was talking about the right thing. And do you know, sir, what the dictionary definition of a feminist is? I didn't either. Listen to this. Webster defines a feminist as a human being, not a woman, a human being that believes in equal rights for women. I'm shocked that that's what that meant. Because by that definition, I would consider myself a feminist. And I didn't even know that at the time.
I don't think he's lying when he says this. I believe him that he thought that about feminism because there's a whole subsection of the internet that is so radicalized that anybody saying anything positive about women or what the female experience is deemed a feminist. I don't know how he can, with good conscience, say, oh, I didn't know that's what feminism was. It's like, was that the first time you ever Googled feminism? And now, all of a sudden, it's clear to you? I think he knows what he's doing here. I think he knows that the people who watch him feel that way about feminism because a lot of people on the internet do. A lot of people think that all feminism is feminazis who want all men to die, which, in my opinion, is a straw man that is intentionally created online to pick apart anybody. So you didn't know, Dave? Or is it possible that you let social media radicalize you to the point that you have no idea what feminism is other than what people online tell you it is? Maybe Google it next time. This story about him bragging about beating up a lesbian is so strange to me. It's like, do you know how many trans people do get beat up? I can't help but get incredibly defensive because of the amount of stuff that is specifically targeted at trans people. Like the way he talks about Adam's apple. The way he does impressions of these women and he makes his voice deeper, it's just gross. And then the crowd's laughing and laughing. See, look, I beat up this masculine woman. I bet her tits got pulverized. It's like he stood up against the big, powerful gay agenda. And this boogeyman that people have, that like all the gay people are transing our kids and everything, it's pervasive. And I guarantee you it's working. I guarantee you he's getting people to agree with him. And that makes me scared.
All these years, I thought it meant frumpy dyke.
All these years, I thought it meant frumpy dyke. Crowd goes wild. Ha ha ha. Aren't feminist queer people gross?
Les was always talking to me some chicken overalls. Men are trying to rape us. Ah, not you, bitch, please.
Every woman that he mentions, he has to get some dig in about their appearance. Women are more than their appearance. Also, unattractive women get raped all the time. In fact, sometimes men like to specifically search out vulnerable women. Vulnerable women are incredibly easy for these men to take advantage of. That's what happened to me when I was younger.
I support the feminist movement. I do, in my own way. She said, I hope those white bitches get tear gassed. There's a problem in that feminist movement, isn't there? From its inception in America, there's always been a racial component.
I'm just gonna say it. Now, racism is not only the fault of gay rights and trans rights, but it is also the fault of feminism. Because feminist white women in the 1920s were racist. Therefore, feminism is a racist movement. Not that race is an incredibly complicated thing that's interwoven into every aspect of our history. No. I think it's the gays. And those women. I don't like them, especially not if they're fat. That's what he's saying.
I supported the Me Too movement, but the whole time, I thought that the way they handled it was stupid.
Pause for laughs.
It was.
Let me set up this joke for you. All right, guys. Feminists were racist. Now, hear me out. That Me Too movement, that was pretty stupid, right? Crowd goes wild. That's not a joke, Dave. That's just calling it stupid.
What the fuck was y'all doing? And then I said something about it in one of my specials, and all these women actresses came after me. I said, man, fuck y'all too. You canceled. I ain't jerking off to none of your pictures again.
All these female actresses came after me. I'm not jerking off to you anymore. Again, women and their appearance. I'm not. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but like this is not new with Dave. And I would love to go into his content in general, but there's only so much time, and there are plenty of people who have done that before me.
What I think the feminist movement needs to be very successful is a male leader. I'll do it.
I know that's a joke, but every joke has a lick of truth in it. So he spent this past segment explaining to women how their feminist movement was wrong and annoying, how they're all ugly anyway because they didn't agree with him, and that Me Too and the actions that they did to try to stand up for themselves were stupid. So it kind of does sound like you want to lead them, Dave. It kind of sounds like you have some ideas of what they should be doing. So go ahead.
Protect all of your interests and all that I ask for in return. Was that you suck my dick?
Yeah, it's a joke. I'm so sick of this.
And now we get to the core of the crisis.
Oh boy.
What? What is a woman?
Oh
In this day
boy.
and time, is there even such thing as a woman or a man or anything? Seems to be a question nowadays. Gay people get mad at me, lesbians get mad at me. But I'm gonna tell you right now, this is true. These transgenders, these niggas want me dead.
Gay people get mad at me. Straight people get mad at me. All these people get mad at me. But these transgenders, he omits transgender people. He, at one point in this special, says that we are not a people.
Every time I come out on stage, I be scared. I be looking around the crowd.
Oh, are you, Dave? Are you afraid that the transphobia you spew is going to put you in danger? Oh, that must be so hard for you. Oh, Dave.
Searching for knuckles and Adam's apples to see where the threats might be coming from.
You want us to believe that you spend your pre-show on the prowl looking for an angry mob of queer people that are going to beat you up? And by the way, Knuckles, Adam's apples, all he's doing is drawing attention to features that trans women have always been picked apart for and always feel self-conscious about. And you know what the first thing a transphobe loves to do to a trans woman? Message them and tell them all the ways they don't pass.
I said, careful, Dave, they after you. I said, what?
As if I am supposed to believe that he's in danger, that the gay agenda, are the gay crusaders gonna come for you? The crowd is loving this. He's saying what the crowd wants to say, but is too afraid of being canceled by the gay agenda.
Mean laws in our country. North Carolina passed a law once that said a person in North Carolina must use the restroom that corresponds with the gender they were assigned on their birth certificate. No.
He said transgender people are not allowed to use the bathroom of their preferred choice, essentially. And you know what the crowd did? Woo! And he said, no, because he doesn't want the narrative to escape him, because this whole punchline he sets up about trans people, in the end, he's like, no. They can have this one. They should use the bathroom. So that's something, but he knows his audience.
It's a mean law.
It's not a good law.
No American should have to present a birth certificate, take a shit at Walmart.
He is belittling the issue. And you can see in his inflection as he delivers the joke, he is taking the piss out of the issue, trying to make it seem like a joke. And you can see that because the crowd laughs as he says it. To a cis person, whatever bathroom I use is actually none of their business. And even if I was banned from using the woman's bathroom and wasn't legally allowed to do it, nobody is checking at the door. All this law does is give legal evidence of transphobia on our record. And it doesn't help trans people. It doesn't help cis people because I'm still waiting for one example of a trans predator that's going in and utilizing this bathroom bill to molest people. And also, nobody ever talks about how this affects the trans people. Nobody talks about how trans people get assaulted all the time. Trans people getting assaulted in bathrooms is actually a really big problem. I know multiple people it's happened to, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was followed into the men's bathroom, and that was the day that I realized, you know what? I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to use the men's bathroom because it doesn't matter if you do everything right. Sometimes people are going to want to hurt you. Why do people think that somebody who is planning on molesting someone in a bathroom is going to be stopped by a law just being like, oh, swiper no swiping, darn it, I can't get in now because it's not legal. Guess what? It's not legal to rape people, but people still do it.
Ask yourself, if you're thinking about it, who are these laws designed to protect?
Who are they designed to protect? Because they're not designed to protect trans people. I've never heard anyone mention the issue of sexual assault against trans people, mostly because I don't think anyone cares. I want to die.
And this is what this law is going to do. And suddenly, a woman walks into the men's room. That's strange. And then she stands shoulder to shoulder with me at the urinal. I'm like, bitch, what's going on with you? And then she hikes her skirt up and pulls a real live meaty dick out.
And the crowd erupts. How funny is this? How hilarious the concept of a trans woman outing themselves to a stranger because she's using the bathroom. How hilarious. And yes, I get what he's saying, and I'm on his side here. I think that it's inappropriate for a trans woman to have to use the male bathroom, and I appreciate that he's saying it. But why is that the punchline? Why are trans people the punchline in all of these?
I would feel better if it was a man with a vagina. He backed up to the urinal next to me.
Now, it's not just trans women that are the punchline. Trans men are the punchline. Isn't it funny that no trans men can use the urinal comfortably? I love publicly making people affirm their gender. And I love it when trans people are picked apart for their gender. I know so many trans men who find public restrooms and urinals specifically incredibly triggering. And trans people in general are always going to be triggered by bathrooms. You have to publicly declare your gender. And in the case of a trans man, a lot of them are never going to be able to use the urinal without being self-conscious. So why make it a punchline? He is making a point when he says that there's more outrage directed online for feminism and white feminism. And there's a lot of problems with racism when it comes to civil rights issues. So I'm not going to pretend like he's not making any good points. But then he turns it around on trans. Let's face it, the amount of white queers who actively promote hashtag trans rights, hashtag queer rights, are probably equally likely to have tweeted out hashtag Black Lives Matter. That doesn't change that no amount of performative activism matters. And it's either not enough or it's attention-seeking too much and not worth it. When he says he's looking around for Knuckles and Adam's apples, he's like, see all those transgender clockable women? They're big burly men that are going to beat me up and I'm the victim, actually. I just hate it when transphobes say, I'm just saying gender is real. I don't think anybody thinks gender is more real than a trans person. Even a non-binary person knows how real gender is because the feeling of dysphoria or feeling of not being able to conform to your assigned gender is as real as the stereotypes and gender roles that we impress on people. It's the same thing as girls who think they're tomboys as a kid. Not everybody is married to the idea of womanhood. Not everybody's married to the idea of becoming a lumberjack in the woods and never crying. But we're spoon-fed gender, and gender is real, Dave. Trans people, I think, know that better than everyone. because they've experienced both ends of the spectrum. So many trans people have constant comments in their life about their Adam's apple or their man hands, and it's just real mature, Dave, real specific. Like, God, how many trans people are you trying to hurt today? As if a mob of trans people is going to beat him up after the show. Although, if you want to start an angry mob, I'll drop a link in the below, bestie. I'm aware that he's with me on this issue and on the bathroom issue. He's actually supporting trans people, but I feel like he's bringing up the issue just to make a mockery of it. He's very clearly painting it as if the trans community is getting in a tiff over nothing. I don't think he realizes that the average person is a lot more transphobic than they're willing to say they are online. The average person probably thinks some pretty judgmental thoughts about a lot of things in their life, but they don't say it because they don't feel comfortable enough to. But things like this make people more comfortable to say these things. People aren't going to watch this and be like, you know what? Dave said trans rights. Yeah, great. I'm glad he thinks we should be able to use whatever bathroom we feel. His supporters don't feel the same way when he set that up and everybody cheered for that bill. I myself could barely deal with the amount of transphobia I faced over the course of my transition. Luckily, I do not deal with it as much as I used to. It is so reductive to assume that just because there's a space now for trans people to talk about their issues, that now it's okay to bash them. I wish that he could create his message and his art and his humor without making us the punchline. I might sound dramatic here, but I have known one too many people who have committed suicide, and a good portion of them are trans. And the truth is that more and more trans people kill themselves every day because not everyone is going to be able to be supported the way they need to. And you can either say, well, that's what they deserve, or you can be like, you know what? I'm just gonna not make an hour-long special shitting on trans people today. You could do that.
You know, I learned something. It's called space Jews.
I like the space Jews jokes. I think it's hilarious. The best part about these is that he's not setting up the people who believe in space Jews even in the joke at all. It's implied that he's laughing at them. But I really don't think it's the same as making the trans woman's dick the punchline.
And I was doing some transgender jokes in Oakland 16 years ago. My pronoun game was not as nice as it is today. I went too far. I said things like tranny and shit. I didn't know these words were bad. And a woman stood up and just gave me the business. Started screaming at me. And I'm sure it was a woman. She kept calling me transphobic and all this shit. I'd never even heard these words before. It's really weird.
He had never heard the word transphobic. 16 years ago. In 2005, he hadn't heard the term transphobic. Okay.
And then she went to the press, and the next day, one of the gay papers wrote all the same things she had said to me about me in the paper. Misquoted the jokes and was calling me transphobic. Again, all these words, I'd never heard them before, but every time that I talk with anybody from that community since, they always repeat the talking points from that article. My least favorite of which being, and I hate this phrase, they say I was punching down on them. The fuck does that mean?
You don't know what punching down means?
At the bar, I'm having a drink by myself, and the only other person in the bar is a woman, a couple stools down, and she was alone. She was older, and it made me feel sad because it was the holidays. Just my daughter's coming home for the holidays. Oh, that's great news. I'm glad she's not going to be alone. And she goes on and on about how great her daughter is. I guess her daughter got a new agent, and she's out in Hollywood. She's in movies and on television and all this stuff. And as she's telling me this, I'm thinking this woman is so sweet. Because I know what your daughter's out in Hollywood doing. He goes, would you like to see her picture? Oh, man, I don't want to see this picture, but what am I going to do? I go, okay, yeah, sure, I'd love to see the picture. And I grab the picture, and this is all I say. This is all I say. Oh, she's very beautiful. And as she puts the picture away, she looks mean all of a sudden, like she caught me in some kind of trap. What does that face mean? And then she goes, she's transgender. And I think to myself, oh, this bitch does know who I am. I really resented that trap because that trap doesn't let me be honest. If I was honest, I wouldn't fall for it. I just looked at the picture like, look at that big chisel jawline, that big thick Joe Rogan neck. Is that a dude?
Look at that big chiseled jawline and that big, thick Joe Rogan neck. Again, this is a woman in the story that has been reduced entirely to their appearance. And not only that, but major transphobic talking points of pinpointing a trans woman and what makes them a trans woman and what makes them clockable. And all he's doing is telling a story about how he saw a picture of a trans woman and he thought to himself, looks like a dude. What's the punchline? Is that a joke or just being mean?
Is your daughter a man? Can't say that shit. Thursday, that's Thanksgiving, and I'm in a totally different bar. And this bar, trust me, it's not a nice place. I looked across the room, and I saw the trans bitch from the picture.
The trans bitch from the picture.
I said, what is a trans person doing in a place like this? This is very dangerous behavior.
What is a trans person doing in a place like this? Good question. Because we have to constantly worry about our safety because of who we are. Because of shit like this. God.
And she was with two big, buff, gay black dudes. I didn't know these dudes, but I know they was gay. They had a dick in their mouth. They wouldn't look any gayer than they did just sitting there. To make sure that everyone can hear me, I walk right up to her and I go, hey, I just met your mother the other night and she told me all the great things you're doing in Hollywood. And I cannot believe that someone from a podunk place like this can achieve all that. I'm so proud of you. Welcome home. And the whole bar said, hurrah. I ought to buy her some time. You know what I mean? A couple more drinks and these fellas are going to start asking her for some pussy she might not have.
Asking her for some pussy that she might not have.
Thank you so much. We shook hands. As she was shaking my hand, her face turned mean like her mom's. She said, do you mind not punching down on my people? Oh, I don't like that. Normally I would have let it go, but I was drunk. I said, what might you need, bitch?
What might you mean?
I was careful to call her a bitch because I didn't want to blow her cover. Turns out she wasn't hiding. She was loud. She was proud. She let me have it in front of everybody. Screaming at me all the talking points from that article. You transphobic, this and that. Kept clapping her hands in my face. Let me tell you.
All the talking points from the article. At no point in this special does he happen to mention what these talking points are. And I think that is so dishonest. And if you want to learn more about Dave Chappelle and his history of transphobia, I will link a video down below. Because he isn't talking about the issue. Because he knows that if he ignores it, he can act like it's not a problem.
Transgenders are people. Now we're my people this, my people that. I said, what do you mean your people? Was y'all kidnapped in Transylvania, brought here as slaves?
You all kidnapped in Transylvania and brought here as slaves. So not only is he making fun of this woman for being trans, he's making fun of her for caring about the trans community. And he had the audacity to say, what people? The problem is that this kind of behavior actually makes a difference in the way people treat us. And if you don't believe me, talk to a trans person you know. Ask them. Did people start to treat you differently at all? And they'll be like, what do you mean? Of course they did.
She said, my people have struggled for decades, honey. Decades. And I looked at them gay black dudes like, is there anything you niggas need to tell me?
I highly doubt that she said, my people have been struggling for decades to a black man. Not only that, but trans people have existed for so much longer than a few decades that to me reads as proof that all of these stories of public confrontations with angry transes, yeah, I don't think they're real. I just don't.
I'm exaggerating. She's actually a very nice person, and I'm cool with her now, but boy, that shit got on my nerve.
He admits here, he exaggerated the story. He's cool with her now. They talked about it. But boy, did that piss him off. And all the crowd laughs, blah, blah, blah. He says all this after setting her up as an unreasonable punchline. The worst thing he could say that she did is shake his hand and say, please stop punching down on my people. And that's what incensed him. Somebody politely asking him to stop talking about trans women. If he hadn't spent this whole special not mentioning these talking points that were constantly repeated to him, maybe he would have an argument. The fact that he leaves them out proves that he doesn't have a response to them. And he's saying, oh, well, you can't criticize me because you're not a fan of me. Guess what, pal? That's not how the world works. You know how many people criticize me who I would not consider fans of me? Because I would say it is basically all of them. What kind of a statement is that?
Never had a problem with transgender people. If you listen to what I'm saying, clearly, my problem has always been white people.
But you spent the whole time not talking about white people, but talking about white trans people. And everybody claps and cheers, and it's like, you're right.
On the ropes, you changed all the rules. Oh yeah? Yeah, motherfucker. Well, I'm a girl now, nigger, and you must treat me as such. Call me a girl.
So, his impression of a trans woman, remember, always consists of him deepening his voice, mentioning her Adam's apple, mentioning the size of her hands and neck. I don't think it's a coincidence that he gets a deep voice and says, call me a girl.
I said, I know niggas in Brooklyn that wear high heels just to feel safe. I asked you, why?
I know people in Brooklyn who wear high heels to feel safe. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to call you out there, Dave. If you don't feel safe, high heels are the worst shoe you can possibly wear because you cannot run in high heels. You cannot do anything in high heels if you're in danger. And I don't believe that there are people that are worried on the street just being like, I'm going to get killed for being black. Ooh, but if I'm black and gay, there's no such thing as intersectionality to him. I don't get him.
Easier for Bruce Jenner to change his gender than it is for Cassius Clay to change his name.
You did dead name Caitlyn Jenner there. Why? What does that achieve? Everybody knows her. The reason why it's easier for Caitlyn Jenner to transition is because Caitlyn Jenner is rich, Caitlyn Jenner is white, and that's the end of the list. He acts like it's just you walk into the club and bam, you take hormones, bam, trans. It's like he lives in an alternate reality where the world is trans and he's fighting for the straights.
Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not even talking about them. I'm talking about us, and they don't listen.
I'm not talking about them. You didn't tell a story about beating up a trans man. You didn't tell a story about imagining a trans woman whipping her dick out next to you. You didn't tell a story about getting in a public altercation with a trans woman where I don't think she did anything wrong other than say, hey, don't talk about trans people. And you made a scene. Don't make it as if you're not talking about trans people specifically, because you are.
Cancel J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books.
Here we go.
And they canceled her because she said in an interview, gender was a fact.
She said, gender is a fact. If you believe that that's what J.K. Rowling said, I don't think I can get through to you. The amount of information about what J.K. Rowling has said about trans people that exists on the internet is so large. If you still think all she said, gender is a fact, then you clearly aren't trying to learn about it. So I will include links to videos about J.K. Rowling and the things that she has said. Not only does she publicly endorse and support the works of other TERFs, she spends a great deal of time about how these vulnerable young women are being irrevocably changed and disfigured in their attempts to transition. None of this is gender is a fact. She's specifically attacking access to healthcare for trans people because, quote, they would have trans me. She often refers to this work by Abigail Shrier called Irreversible Damage that talks about what happens when a person who goes on HRT changes their mind. And J.K. Rowling spends a majority of her time when she talks about trans people talking about people who detransition. And I would like to point out, in almost every study conducted of detransition, it's estimated that only about 2 or 3% of trans people or people who go on HRT at any point do decide to transition. And of that 2%, only 0.4% of them regret the physical transition. This is very important to keep in mind in the context of what she's saying, because J.K. Rowling makes it out that there's a whole movement that's irrevocably damaging young women without their knowledge. And it's so damaging because it doesn't even affect people like me. I am post-transition and I have had access to my healthcare and I will continue to. But that's not the same for every trans person. And if we don't say anything about it, that could change. Laws change every day, and it's illegal in some places for you to be queer, let alone trans. So don't act like all J.K. Rowling said was sex is real.
Trans community got mad as shit. They started calling her a TERF. I didn't even know what the fuck that was.
So he didn't know what a transphobe was, and now he doesn't know what a TERF is.
Words win arguments. So I looked it up.
I'm so proud of him.
TERF is an acronym.
He looked it up.
It stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. This is a real thing. This is a group of women that hate transgender. They don't hate transgender women, but they look at trans women the way we blacks might look at blackface. It offends them. Like, ooh, this bitch is doing an impression of me.
They don't hate trans women. They just liken it to blackface. I've been told this many a time by many a TERF. TERFs in general think that trans women are a parody and a mockery of women, and they regularly say that. I'm not going to get into all of this because, again, I'm a white person and I'm not going to tell him what blackface is or isn't. But let me tell you, it is none of your business how I live my life. And the average woman who sees me on the street isn't going to think, God damn it, that impersonation of a woman is infringing on my life. Whereas if a black person sees a person in blackface, that is easily noticeable. That is going to inflict generational trauma. But there's nothing like that. When you see a trans person in public, the worst thing you might notice is, oh, that's a trans person. Like, he's like, that's what they think. That's not what I think. But he spends time on his special airing these ideas so that people can laugh like, haha, trans people are kind of like doing blackface. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Because I am not a woman, nor am I a trans.
Nor am I a trans.
I am a feminist.
Because he's Team TERF. Everybody applauds. I'm Team TERF. Woo!
Gender is a fact. You have to look at
That
it
is
from
not
both
what
sides.
being a TERF is. No trans person says that gender does not exist. And he doesn't even know the difference between biological sex and gender. And that's how you know that he doesn't give a shit. Because TERFs aren't saying that gender is real. TERFs are saying that sex is real. And they're saying that you are your biologically determined sex. Nobody ever includes hermaphrodites in this discussion. Nobody ever includes intersex people and people who are born with multiple parts, because those people exist. Some of them have to go on HRT. Some of them have to transition in order to fit into the world. And you know what? They're not going to go away just because J.K. Rowling doesn't like it.
Caitlyn Jenner, whom I've met, wonderful person.
I
Caitlyn
doubt it.
Jenner was voted Woman of the Year. Her first year as a woman.
And he uses this fact as a means to say, look at all these rights that transes have that aren't legitimate, that they don't deserve. Nobody wanted Caitlyn Jenner to be Woman of the Year. Nobody. Nobody. Certainly not me. That says more about privilege than it does about trans people.
Gender is a fact. This is a fact. Every human being in this room.
Gender is a fact. Gender is a fact. Gender is a fact. Gender is a fact. That's the only thing that these people ever say. I don't have a problem with you transgenders, but like, dude, gender is a fact. That doesn't mean anything. The difference between biological sex and gender is performative. That's why girls that don't play with Barbies are told they're tomboys, because they're not performing their gender. They are still their sex. The existence of trans people is never going to change the fact that there will always be cis people. But people like him and people like his audience tend to act like we're trying to turn the whole world trans. When honestly, I think the world would be a better place.
I am not saying that to say that trans women aren't women. I am just saying that those pussies that they got. You know what I mean?
Another joke without a punchline other than trans women. I'm not saying that trans women aren't women, but those pussies. You know what I mean? And the crowd erupts with laughter. How hilarious the idea of a trans person with a vagina. How stupid. That's not a joke, Dave. It's just like your Me Too joke where you're just like, me too. That was stupid. Trans vaginas. I don't like those. That's not a joke. That's just being hateful.
Saying it's not pussy, but that's like beyond pussy or impossible pussy.
I'm not saying it's not pussy. I'm just saying it's like beyond pussy or impossible pussy. Agreeing that it is worse, it is a imitation at best, but that is following up him being like, I wouldn't want that. So yeah, Dave, it does kind of sound like you're speaking less of trans vaginas than you think of cis vaginas. And that's your right. You're allowed to not want to have sex with me because I don't want to have sex with you. It is interesting to me, Dave, how much time you spend thinking about other people's genitals.
Tastes like pussy, but that's not quite what it is.
Tastes like pussy, but it's not quite what it is. Not to say that transgender women are women, but I mean, their vaginas are fake.
I'm in trouble now.
And then he laughs that he's in trouble, as if a few trans people being discriminated against and being upset about it on Twitter are going to affect him. You want to know what punching down is, Dave? Making fun of somebody while a whole room laughs at them with you, because you know that you're not going to face the consequences of what you say. They will. You're rich, you're internationally acclaimed, you have a room of people cheering for what you just said, and I'm sure a million transphobes are going to eat this up.
You didn't know that one of the coolest people I ever met was a transgender woman. And this is not trans when I met her. Lived in San Francisco. Daphne Gorman was the name.
Now we get to learn the heartfelt story of why he can't be transphobic because he knows a trans.
I do 18 shows in the Bay Area, sometimes in Oakland, Dirty Hood nightclub, and she would be there. White trans woman, laughing loud, hard, everything I said, especially the trans jokes. Very puzzling.
I think it's interesting to me that he thinks it's puzzling that a trans person would laugh at trans jokes, because every trans person I know loves to make trans jokes in an environment where they feel safe and not judged. They like to make trans jokes about themselves. It's not as funny, Dave, when you're making trans jokes to a bunch of people who are like, ha! Those trannies! That's what he's doing.
Turns out it was her dream to be a comedian, and I was her hero. It's very moving. I could not dislike somebody that felt that way about me.
I could not dislike somebody who felt that way about me. He could not have more clearly implied he was predisposed to not like this trans person. That's essentially what he implied.
I needed an opening act, and I remembered that trans woman I met. So I called her on the phone. She started saying a bunch of wild stuff. I was like, relax. I don't want any pussy. I was
He doesn't miss an opportunity to be like, oh, no, I wouldn't have sex with you. I wouldn't have that impossible vagina. You, trans.
This woman had only done stand-up comedy 8 times in her life. This is little to no experience. And now she's about to open a show for what many call the GOAT. She was dressed to the motherfucking nines. I mean, I'm transphobic, and even I was like, you look nice. Mike and walked right down the middle and looked at the crowd like a gangster. Man, you should have seen her work. This bitch bombed for 45 minutes straight.
I do love this heartfelt moment where we laugh about how bad of a comedian this amateur trans comedian was.
It impressed me. Any other comedian I've ever seen, if they had bombed as bad as she did, would have snuck out of the back of the theater and went home fried or something. She didn't do that. Not only did she not read, she found a seat right up in front. Sat up there and was laughing as hard as she always laughs, as if nothing bad had even happened to her. And I saw her show. Something bad happened to her show.
He has to remind us how bad she was.
The crowd didn't like that shit at all, because she sucked. And a guy in the back of the room stood up. Daphne's hair was dyed blonde at the time. And the guy screamed out. His energy felt wild as fuck. He said, "Hey, Daphne!" And everyone got tense. We didn't know it was a heckler or active shooter. And he said, "It's the car that matched the drapes." Yeah, it was fucked up. The whole crowd kind of groaned because it was so like mean. Everybody groaned except for Daphne. She kind of laughed. It was weird, and she didn't even look all the way back. She said, "Sir, I don't have carpets. I have hardwood floors."
I have to say, the only redeemable thing for me about this special is Daphne's joke. I don't have carpets. I have hardwood floors. What an icon.
Boy, when she said that shit, it blew the roof off the place. Cut through all the tension with that one joke. She made up for 45 minutes of a stinker of a show.
Remember, she was bad.
I go, I love you to death, but I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. The whole crowd laughed, except for Daphne. Now she looks at me like I'm not her friend anymore. Like I'm something bigger than me. Like I'm the whole world and the guy. And she said, I don't need you to understand me. I said, what? She said, I just need you to believe. Just like this, she goes, that I'm having a human experience.
I don't need you to understand me. I just want you to believe that I'm having a human experience. Couldn't have said it better, Daphne.
I believe you, bitch. Because she didn't say anything about pronouns. She didn't say anything about me being in trouble. She said, just believe I'm a person and I'm going through it.
Because she didn't say anything about pronouns. Because she didn't get me in trouble. You know why she didn't get you in trouble, Dave? Because nobody can get you in trouble for being transphobic. And I guarantee you, Daphne was of a generation where it was perfectly acceptable for her to be dunked on for every which way of how trans she was, including that guy that she had an amazing retort to. I'm sure she'd heard that line a million times from somebody trying to come for her hair. I don't see how he can't see the connection between transphobia and what he's talking about. Because she didn't talk about pronouns. I hate that pronouns have become an issue as if people are being militantly policed, when all it is about trying to create a space for trans people to not feel so uncomfortable. But
And don't forget my opening act, Daphne. The crowd stood up. And I looked at her, tears came out of her eyes. She couldn't believe it was happening. I couldn't believe it was happening because her show stunk.
remember, she's bad.
I was all laughing real hard, and as she's telling us, and everyone's laughing. I'm looking around, I'm like, oh my God, she is funny. I pulled her aside, I said, you're hilarious. I didn't know that when you were on stage.
Because remember, she bombed.
When Sticks and Stones came out, a lot of people in the trans community were furious with me, and apparently they dragged me on Twitter. I don't give a fuck, because Twitter's not a real place.
Yeah, it's not a real place. And that's why acting like there's this big bad gay agenda after you is such a dishonest way to paint the issue. Angry people on Twitter are angry because they have nowhere else to vent their frustrations. We can't call our congresswoman and just be like, hey, can you stop the government from discriminating against trans people? And they're going to be like, yeah, sure. Trans people are angry because of all the shit they go through. And what do? They tend to spend most of their time directing it at each other or at people who make them feel small. And that's why you've attracted all this attention, Dave. Why are you talking about their impossible vagina? Why? Why do you need to compare them to imitation human? It's gross because people see us that way. People do. And you know what? If you do see us that way, that's your right. But the people who kill us are the people who see us that way.
Daphne did that for me. She wrote a tweet that was very beautiful. What she said was, he said, punching down on someone requires you to think less of them. And I know him, and he doesn't. He doesn't punch up. He doesn't punch down. He punches lines, and he's a master at his craft. That's what she said. I'm a friend. It took a lot of heart to defend me like that. And when she did that, the trans community dragged that bitch all over Twitter.
Well, there's nothing that the trans community loves more than dragging another trans person, so I do believe this. Sadly.
They was going in on her, and she was holding her own because she's funny. But 6 days after that wonderful night I described to you, my friend Daphne killed herself. Oh, yeah. It's a true story. My heart was broken. Yeah, it wasn't the jokes. I don't know if it was them dragging her. I don't know what's going on in her life, but I bet dragging her didn't help.
What happened to this woman is very sad, and I'm not going to pretend like it probably had nothing to do with her being dragged by trans Twitter. There's nothing more real than the effect it has when a trans person loses their community. We've seen a lot of trans people who getting criticized so wildly by their tribe does lead them to kill themselves. But I do think it's interesting how After all this, after literally telling an example of her experiencing public transphobia, he then says, I don't know if it was the trans people that made her do it, but she killed herself. He knows that he is making it seem as though she killed herself because of the trans community. I'm not going to say what did or didn't happen, but all I know is that that is a dishonest way to paint it, because trans people who do kill themselves never do it for one reason. They always have been struggling with mental health. Most trans people struggle with mental health for their whole lives, and I guarantee you that it is not helped by casual transphobia that I'm sure she experienced, and that I'm sure that every other trans person like myself has experienced. And I think it's dishonest. You are so hesitant to even analyze the way your words can influence people. It doesn't matter if you personally don't think less of trans people, Dave. You have said on a national platform, number 5 in US Netflix, so that's how many people are watching this, and you have told them all that trans women are beyond women. They are imitation women that are less than and worse. And even if that doesn't change the way that you think of them, it does change the way other people think of them. And it has a profound impact on the way we're treated and the way we're abused.
Like Daphne lied to me. She always says she identified as a woman. And then one day she goes up to the roof of a building and jumps off and kills herself. Clearly. Only a man would do some gangster shit like that.
To me, that joke is gross because, again, there is no punchline about a trans woman killing herself. In this case, the punchline is it was a manly thing to do, and everybody laughs.
I'm telling you right now, Daphne would have loved that joke. That's why she was my friend.
To be honest, that is the type of joke I would make with my friends too. But there is a difference when you have a national platform, and I believe that. I'm sure there will be children that watch this. I'm sure that there will be young, impressionable people that watch this and think, that's hilarious. And maybe it is for them. But it's not hilarious when you're trans. It's not hilarious to be trans, and we're not a punchline.
Because I got in touch with the family and I started a trust fund for her daughter. Because I know that's all she ever really cared about.
The fact that he set up a trust fund for this woman's daughter is a very beautiful thing. I think, and I do believe this, that if he truly cared about being seen as transphobic, he could do the same. He could set up or donate money to charities that help trans homeless youth, maybe Black trans homeless youth, of which there are many who are going to be the most affected by this rhetoric he's spewing. If he wanted to change his public opinion, I genuinely believe he could, but he doesn't.
And I don't know what the trans community did for her, but I don't care because I feel like she wasn't their tribe. She was mine. Ready to have the conversation that I'm not ready to have today. But I'll tell that little girl, young lady, I knew your father. And he was a wonderful woman.
You can call a trans woman a father, but why? Why he? I'm sure that this seems like nitpicking, but it seems like he's taking every opportunity he can to belittle the reality that trans people live. And by saying she killed herself like a man, I told his daughter that he was a great father, it just seems like not honoring her memory and not honoring who she was. There's no reason he couldn't have said, oh, I knew your mother and she was a wonderful woman. But no, he had to make the punchline, he was a wonderful woman, because isn't that funny?
Empathy is not gay. Empathy is not black. Empathy is bisexual. It must go both ways.
Well, that's true.
Remember, taking a man's livelihood is akin to killing him. I'm begging you, please do not abort the baby.
That siren, that's trying to let you know, red flag. Taking a man's livelihood is the same as killing him. Right after telling the story of a trans woman who was likely bullied to the point of suicide, and he said they're the same. Maybe I'm reading into it, but it really does seem like he's trying to make himself out as the real victim of the trans community and be like, you guys are the bullies.
LGBTQ, LMNOPQIZ, it is over. I am not telling another joke about you until we are both sure that we are laughing together. I'm telling you, this is done. I'm done talking.
Interesting how after making a joke of the name of the community, he's like, I'm out. I'm not saying anything else about you guys. Well, he has already kind of said it all. Well, that was exhausting. Sure that the only people that are going to be upset about this are going to be trans people, and maybe that's just the way it is. But I really hope that this video could help you see why some of the things he said, I believe, are very transphobic. And not only that, I don't even know if he himself is transphobic. All I know is that that is the energy that he is creating to talk for an hour just about trans people, because he knew it would get him attention, it would get him canceled by the gay agenda, and ultimately, I guarantee you, it's only going to help him get more. Maybe that's exactly what I'm doing here, but I hope that I was at least able to give a trans person's perspective on this. He says that empathy is a two-way street, and I understand, and I agree with a lot of his points. I've said throughout this video, I think he makes good points about race relations. I think he makes good points about selective outrage and virtue signaling, but he says these regressive practices are a result of people caring more about trans people than black people. I do not think it's fair to put minorities up against each other. I don't know a single trans person who is for trans rights and against the rights of others. We are not powerful enough to stand on our own. I just hope that someday he can see the damage that he's doing. If you did like this video, I would appreciate a like, maybe a subscribe, maybe just let me know down in the comments what you think. If you didn't like this video, please let me know. Please dislike it.